Waiting is always the hardest part when you hit the go live, where it
Right.
decides whether it wants to let you be live or not. Welcome to another edition of the Happy Hour podcast. Ricky is traveling for work. He's in Florida. We may see him a little bit later in the month, but as we turn to the month of March, getting ready for free agency and the draft, we wanted to look at consensus ranks across the positions. So today, as we begin that by looking at our top 10 quarterbacks, I'm joined with two of our other writers and panelists, Jason and John. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great, Matt. How are you?
Hanging in there. Last 70-degree day before snowpocalypse descends this weekend.
We got 70 coming tomorrow, and I've got a tea time booked. So
Very nice. Jealous.
You probably don't have to worry about snowpocalypse, though, Jason.
No. Maybe not.
I remember one time 2 years ago in February, we went for somebody's 40th birthday to Las Vegas. And when we landed, it was actually snowing in Las Vegas, which was a massive disappointment coming from Colorado. And all the way to the hotel, our Uber driver was like, "It's snowing. Isn't it great? It's something different." Like, sure. This is what I just left.
Yeah.
All right. Well, as I said, we are going to be diving into quarterbacks. Today, what we're doing for the month of March is we are looking at consensus rankings for the top 10 for quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end the next 4 weeks. Panel of 4 of us, the 3 of us plus Ricky, turned in our top 10. The way that it worked was we put all the players down there and we assigned them a score 10-1 based on where they were in the position, max score being 40. And this is where our top 10 came out. There are actually 11 quarterbacks, spoiler alert, because we had a 3-way tie at the 9th position, which kind of tells you a little bit of the uncertainty of where we're going. So we're going to go through these top 10 or 11 in this case, one by one. And then at the end, I'm going to ask you guys who you would vote out and who you think is missing, because we all probably had at least one player that didn't make it in here. But we're going to start with number 1, 37 overall points, 2 of the 4 first place votes, Josh Allen of Buffalo Bills. You guys were not either. I gave him a first place vote, and so did Ricky. What do you guys think about Josh Allen ending up on top?
I think the top 3 are basically, roll the dice. And obviously we'll get into the other 2, but I'm not mad at it.
Yeah, I felt the same. If you wanted to interchange Allen and Mahomes, I wasn't too concerned. And I think, as John alluded to, Herbert, I feel like he separates from the remainder of the pack as well. I'm just a hair leery to include him with Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes at the moment, but he's not a terrible consolation prize with the third QB off the board for me, that's for sure.
What I like about Allen, and we'll see if they ever finally fix this issue, is he's still primarily one of the biggest weapons out of the backfield for them. In fantasy, that's been good. And what I think separates him from a couple of the other running quarterbacks that we'll see further down on this list is his durability. He has made all 49 starts the last 3 seasons, and he doesn't ever seem to get too banged up. We'll see if that changes. He did have more rushing yards, but fewer rushing touchdowns than he had in his first 3 years. Maybe that's a sign. Maybe Buffalo actually realizes they should either commit to giving the ball to Devin Singletary or get a running back, and that'll change. But right now, that's, to me, what gives him a little bit of a slight edge over our number 2 selection, which was Patrick Mahomes. He came in right hot on Allen's heels with 36 points. Jason, he was your number 1. What do you love about Mahomes?
Really, you're just getting consistency, and I would say a little bit more of a reliable durability, at least the perception of durability, because he's pretty much, you might want to say he's, a resurgence of a young Aaron Rodgers, the premier pocket passer in the league. But as you've said, Josh Allen looks to do that as well now from what we've seen for 2 years, and adds a little bit more mobility, not in the sense that he's just going to take literal rushing plays away from the run game, but he has the opportunity to turn, broken plays into positive yardage and keep drives going, which just keeps his volume going. It's pretty incredible.
John, he was pretty high up for you too.
Yeah, I mean, he is what he is. He started off bad. Went on a little bit of a drought midseason as far as the passing touchdowns. Still finished fourth in total points. So even when it looks like it's a bad season for him, it's probably going to turn out just fine.
Yeah, I would say consistency-wise, he might be one of the most consistent, because you'll see, at times Allen has kind of bottomed out or had some rough games too. But what I'm curious to see is it felt like the offense changed a little bit and was a little less high-flying last year throughout. I don't know if that's going to be a permanent change you're seeing. They really need to diversify, I think, beyond Hill and Kelsey, which is probably something we'll touch on when we do our wide receiver and tight end ranks. 3 years ago, those guys probably would have been 1 or 2 and for all of us, and nobody would have questioned it. But now I think we've seen that slide down. They've never really developed a running game. Mahomes still is incredible, but I have more questions, I guess, about the Chiefs' offense than I have in any of the last few off seasons. Number 3 on the consensus is Justin Herbert. And John, you gave him your first place vote. What do you love about Herbert?
Well, out of the 3, Herbert's the youngest. Last season, new offensive coordinator, new system. He still went over 5,000 yards. He was in third in total scoring behind Brady by 1 point. With Brady out, that would put him in second. And it's not like this is something new. He was top 10 in his rookie season too. So he's just getting better. Pocket passer, but he can run. Again, going to that Aaron Rodgers comparison, Aaron Rodgers has never been a rusher, but, he can break off a 20-yard run without, well, maybe not anymore, but he used to break off those 20-yarders pretty frequently. So, I like the guy a lot. And some of it has to do with, Mahomes' season last year. He scored high, but it wasn't consistent. And then Josh Allen did a lot. Like, he had a lot of things that were his career worsts. So, I'm kind of worried about him, even though I had him ranked, third?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've got more worries about Allen and Mahomes than I do Herbert.
All right, Jason, what are your thoughts?
I think if you're drafting first or second in the Superflex draft in the startup, and you can trade back to pick 3 and get a first-round pick in the rookie draft or something like that, Herbert is the ideal candidate to end up with there, plus the extra pick.
Yeah,
that seems probably a bit extreme for what you could get, but I wouldn't have any problem with somebody suggesting moving off of a Mahomes or an Allen and ending up with Herbert and almost anything else. I don't think you're really losing anything there. Maybe a little bit of a gamble at some upside too with Herbert still.
Yeah, I mean, 2 years in, he has a little over 9,300 yards and 69 passing touchdowns, which is nice. But what has probably impressed me the most about Herbert is Keenan Allen's good, but he hasn't always been out there. Mike Williams is good, but he hasn't always been out there. And Herbert will use whoever is out there. I mean, he's made Jalen Guyton look like an all-star. Found Donald Parham. He's found all these backup running backs. It doesn't really seem to phase him, and I think that's only going to get better as they keep going through. So You guys were correct. There is a huge tier break reflected kind of in our scoring between the top three and going down. Herbert was at 34 points. Mahomes had been 36, Allen 37. Next, fourth place for us was Joe Burrow, comes in at 24 points. He starts kind of a next tier that carries us through the top seven. Burrow, an interesting prospect. None of us had him lower than sixth. Jason, you were the highest. You had him fourth. What do you like about Joey B?
I think it's a combination of my how I like to build. Say, my ranks are mostly super flex based for quarterback. I don't know if that's going to differentiate how you would do a one QB ranking, but I'm looking more for stability at the position when you need to roster 2 or 3 and start 2. So Burrow, for me, despite the catastrophic knee injury, appears to be in one of the best spots. And as a pocket passer, that it looks like they're going to let him continue to have pretty solid volume with a lot of great options to throw to. I feel comfortable with him for a long period of time, really, and that's gonna make a difference for me over, say, a Lamar or a Kyler, where we're seeing some of the injury issues creep up with their increased mobility, if you will, and the propensity to run with the ball. Although I think we've also seen that their upper levels of point production, it looks like it's higher than a Joe Burrow. But that's where maybe in one QB I might take a shot more with a Lamar or a Kyler over Joe Burrow.
What do you think, Joe?
So I love Burrow. I would move him into the top tier. I probably wouldn't move him above any of those 3 guys, but I'd move him into the top tier if he played for any team other than the Bengals. Most teams other than the Bengals. Living in Ohio most of my life, they're the Bungles. They've always managed to mess something up. They have an obvious franchise quarterback. He's already gone through the injury that Palmer did. I really like him there. I mean, he finished 8th last year, and it was his 1.5 season. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I really, really like the guy. And he's got Chase and Higgins, so he should be good for a long time.
Yeah, I think his weapons are among the best. Chase, Higgins, and you can't forget about Boyd, which is a nice third receiver option to have. He's even made CJ Uzomah look good at times. He has Mixon behind him.
Yeah, I was going to say Mixon can catch a ball too.
So I would agree. I think he has more stability than some of the mobile quarterbacks around him, especially as it comes. That being said, if the Bengals don't make an investment in the offensive line this offseason, that will give me a moment of pause, because I think we saw, especially in the playoffs and the Super Bowl, he got the S kicked out of him a couple of times. And even a quarterback that's not mobile can only get sacked 9 times a game so many times before it starts to take its toll. I mean, he almost had another knee injury in the Super Bowl. And you're not playing Aaron Donald and Von Miller every week, but the AFC North, no slouches when it comes to defense with the Ravens, the Steelers, and the Browns. So our number 5 coming in with 22 points is Kyler Murray, and we had a little bit of a bigger spread on Kyler Murray. I was the lowest. I had him 7th. John, you were the highest. You had him 4th. What stands out to you about Kyler?
So his receiving core was banged up last year. I mean, imagine the drop-off that Rodgers would have if Devontae went out. Same thing with Kyler. He was dealing with his own injuries. Deandre Hopkins was nowhere to be found other than the IR or, questionable status. So, he gets them back. He did raise his completion percentage, average yards per attempt, his quarterback rating. less interceptions. He did have 13 fumbles last season. Like, he's not going to repeat that. So, he's making moves in the right direction, even in a challenging season. So that's why I have him so high.
Yeah, and for me, I like Murray's talent and potential, but in his 3 years, he's never hit 4,000 yards. He's never hit 30 passing touchdowns. Rushing vaulted him up a little bit the first couple. We saw that kind of come down a little bit, both due to injury and them trying not to. Kyler Murray is a shorter, smaller quarterback. The other thing that gives me a little bit of pause, I guess, which is why I dropped him a couple of spots, is there's been some bad energy between him and his team. And them committing to Cliff Kingsbury through the 2027 season, despite the fact that the guy has cratered at the end of every professional season he's ever had as a head coach, both in college and the pros, is a little interesting to me. But Jason, how are you feeling about Murray?
Honestly, I think Murray is a fantastic offensive weapon. It's just that hint of durability concern that would really change it. If he plays the full season without getting banged up, you could be looking at him as the MVP possibly this year, in my opinion. And the last couple of seasons at a points per game, he's jumped well over 20 points per game when healthy. And at the quarterback position, you're talking about barely a handful of people that are going to do that. It's just mitigating the risk of having to replace him, potentially every season, if you will. And when is that one injury going to happen that suddenly the points per game drops considerably when he returns finally? I think you've seen it even this year. And you can coincide that with not having Deandre Hopkins at the same time, if you will. But, the injuries will have a huge effect. And that's my concern.
Well, if we thought Murray was polarizing, number 6, Lamar Jackson. And this was probably the biggest spread in our consensus ranks. Ricky had him 4th. I was by far the highest. I had him as QB3. I get all the challenges, and definitely we saw the downside of having Lamar last year where injuries took him out for a full 5 games. His passing alone has never really been enough to elevate him, but when he's on and when that offense is on and when they're running the ball well, he can be a huge point machine. Not my favorite quarterback, but that was where I was at. John, you had him all the way down at QB9.
Yes.
A lot of concerns about injury.
Injury, some of it. He had his lowest completion percentage. He's not all that accurate of a quarterback. Appears to be getting worse. Lowest QBR. His average rush per attempt was the lowest of his career, which is real bad. Lowest TDs on the ground. That's where his money's at. And the offensive line was just bad. It was the worst of the career.
Dreadful.
I have a man crush on J.K. Dobbins, so that's going to take a lot of work away from him. And we all see what happened to Cam. Lamar might win you a league this year, maybe next year. But 5 years from now, you're going to be looking for a new quarterback.
Yeah, Jason, you weren't much higher. You had him at 7. Similar concerns?
Yeah, it's really just echoing some similar concerns. I'm not as worried about his performance as I think John alluded to some concerns with deterioration. For me, once we get past Herbert at number 3 in our rankings, I'm pretty fine with having a lot of wiggle room up till QB7, as you can see in our rankings. So having Kyler Murray ahead of him or even Burrow ahead of him is more of a subjective thing at this point than saying one is definitively a better fantasy player than the other.
Yeah.
If that makes, clarifies my position.
Well, you alluded to it. QB7 is kind of another huge tier break for us. The last of the double-digit point scorers at 20 points, Dak Prescott for the Dallas Cowboys. And we were all fairly consistent here. I had him ranked 6th. Ricky had him 7th. John had him 6th. You were the highest, Jason, at 5. Is it the consistency that you like? Concerns at all now that rumors are coming out that Amari Cooper might get the axe?
It'd be nice to have a perfect world where all of your, first round pick offensive weapons are still in place. But I'm not too concerned. Dak, for me, Joe Burrow, very similar. And Dak has, I guess a little bit more certainty with his contract situation. And he's just been in the league and been a top performer for a while. You could also put a, legal issues aside, Desean Watson is right there in the same mold, probably better if on the field. So I'm comfortable with Dak. That's what that comes down to. I feel like I'm making the same argument for Dak as I am with Joe Burrow or even some of the pocket passers who just are much more efficient with their volume.
Yeah, and Dak is a player who early in his career, I think it was his first 3 seasons, he had 6 rushing touchdowns a season. He's dialed that back a little bit, but that's come with a big increase in pass production this last year, 4,449 yards, 37 touchdowns, really kind of balancing that out. How do you feel about Dak, John?
Fantasy football is entirely stats-based. We all know that. And Dak was, as you said, career highs in a lot of things, completion attempt percentage, touchdowns, all stuff you touched on. But he had his career lowest QBR. His rush average was down, which, he's not necessarily a rushing quarterback, especially after his injury. But still something to look at. Lowest TDs on the ground. And a lot of fumbles. He's hit or miss. Probably the reason I have him this low is he's 28. If he was 24, I'd probably have him higher.
Oh, Dak. You got to keep eating that chunky soup to keep you young.
Yes.
Well, after the top 7, we get to a group of quarterbacks to finish this out that it's fair to say split us a lot more. None of them were on everyone's list. After that top 7, that was kind of the tier break of guys that appeared on all 4 lists. And then you start moving around. I think it probably comes down to upside versus stability arguments, which is definitely going to be in play with our number 8 selection, which is Trey Lance, the only 2021 rookie who makes it up into the top 10 for us, and it ends up being Lance. And it is largely thanks to one man, and that would be you, John. I know it's going to be hard to tell who's wearing the 49er jersey. You ranked him up at 7. What do you like about Lance?
He played 3 full games. He averaged 21.4 points per game. He is not ready to be a starter, and he put up over 20 points per game in his starts. A full off season with him number 1, not splitting reps. He had a year to learn the offense. Obviously, they're going to tweak it because they're going from a guy that didn't have the arm, didn't have the speed. Jimmy G could rush, but Trey Lance can rush. And it's still going to be that run first offense. It's just he's going to take some of those runs, and they're going to take a lot of the pressure off of him, I feel like, especially early on.
Yeah. Jason, any thoughts about Lance?
I'm still looking to see a full season before I want to commit, say, early startup capital to to him over even a Wilson or a Stafford. And then even in those senses, you're getting into the draft where, and this is for Superflex, of course, where you're looking at, prime position players at running back, wide receiver, and even tight end. I'm liking a lot of them better than jumping in on Lance just yet. But I understand the upside. I like the gamble. I've got no problem with John, even with the homerism, getting after it with Trey Lance. I'm excited for John.
Lance is also only he just got old enough to drink. He's got a long ways in front of him. Hopefully he is the epitome of franchise quarterbacks. And we can laugh about this in 10 years after he has 7 Super Bowl titles.
They did bet a lot on him, which is why I've heard some people. I don't want to consider Lance until they move on for Garoppolo. You don't spend 3 firsts and wait, and Jordan Love someone, So right. I think it's definitely going to be the starter this year. It's a huge upside play. I think if I was to go and make an early, and you do have to make an early commitment if you want to get Lance and Superflex, because there are people that believe in that upside, that monster potential. I think it's the same argument you're getting in rookie drafts with Malik Willis, who might be the most raw prospect, but if everything hit, could have the most upside. You probably could say the same thing about Lance. If that's a play you're going to make, I think you make sure you back it up with some stable veterans like a Matt Ryan or somebody who's not spectacular and not a high draft cost, but definitely would give you something of a stable floor. In our final spot, we had 3 guys end up tied at 9, and I think that really speaks to a little bit of the uncertainty this time of year. So I'm going to do them in alphabetical order. So the first of those tied players is Matthew Stafford, who just won the Super Bowl with the Rams. Jason and I were the only 2 to rank him. Jason, you had him the highest at 8. What do you like about Stafford?
He finally got in the offense that could bring him to the playoffs, win him a Super Bowl, as much as it came at the cost of the San Francisco 49ers. Apologies to John. I'm still, again, I was rooting for the Niners, John. So
Jaquiski Tartt dropped the interception and lost the game.
He was the MVP for the Rams.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think with Stafford, you're in a prime position. He's still, I believe, 33, maybe 34 years old at the most. I think you still have several years of life out of him in a comfortable situation. So I can't argue with him. Even Russell Wilson, I honestly was going to put both of them the same, but I had to flip a coin between putting 1 8th, 1 9th. So I like them both as still being within the primes of their careers, the extended quarterback prime, if you will.
Stafford just turned 34 right before the Super Bowl.
Right. It's nice.
I feel somewhat the same. He's always been a good stats player. I've had him in my kind of top 10-ish a long time, even when he was in Detroit. They didn't have great teams, but that wasn't because of him. I like the position that he's in with a good offensive mind. If Sean McVay had retired, that might have given me pause because you never know what's going to happen. But I feel like they've made long-term commitments to pieces they have in place. I honestly would not be surprised if OBJ resigns for a decent cap team-friendly deal, since he's probably not going to be available until November. And I think they're going to continue to be perennial playoff contenders. He's found a good marriage of system and player. John, not super surprising. You may not be excited to drop a Ram in your top 10 after this playoffs, but what maybe pushes Stafford down the list for you?
So he's 34.
Yeah.
I loved Matthew Stafford until last season. I would target him in virtually every draft because you could get him in that, mid to late second tier. But One, he's a Ram, but that's a little one. The other one is I'm not going to put anybody in my top 10 that's over 30 unless it's, you know, a 35-year-old Patrick Mahomes maybe, or, you know, somebody like that, like Rodgers the past couple years, Brady the past couple years. And while Stafford's really good, what happens when Cooper Kupp goes down?
Yeah.
There's you know, he's throwing for, instead of 350, he's throwing for 275. Maybe.
You're not on the like Ben Skoranek train. I almost forgot the guy's first name. That's how
I love the guy. I love him, but he's not Cooper Kupp.
Few people are. Although my favorite meme of the offseason, if you haven't had a chance to see it, is the one that puts Cooper Kupp and Kelly Stafford side by side.
I have not seen that.
I'll find it. Our next one is probably one of the most polarizing players just in general. Talent is A+, the situation is F-, and that is Desean Watson. 3 of us ranked him. Ricky was the highest, actually ranked him 8th. You guys dropped him just inside top 10. I actually did not have him in the top 10. And for me, it has nothing to do with his talent. I think if we knew he was definitely going to play all the games, even if he was back in Houston, I would be pretty tempted to throw him top 5 because we've seen it time and again. But I rolled the dice. I was one of those people that in a good situation in a couple of leagues rolled the dice on picking up Desean Watson and ended up watching him wilt on my bench all of the 2021 season, and we'll watch somebody else use my first round draft pick this year for the privilege. So not knowing what's going to happen, you know, how do you guys feel about Watson?
I mean, I love the guy. He was on a big upward trajectory. He's had a season, so he's going to be rusty, but he's also going to be fresh. And it doesn't matter where he goes. You know, he's not going to go to the Jets because they have whatever they have at quarterback right now. He's not going to the Jags. You know, they drafted that one guy we talked about earlier. You know, Dolphins have Tua, and their offense picked up. He's not going any place that doesn't have some sort of weapons. Whatever team he goes to will be better than the Texans. And, you know, I like his upside. He's still only 26. You know, that's far enough away from that magic 30 number I have. I traded for him last season. I actually gave up way too much. I didn't realize I was in a 1 QB, and I paid 2 QB prices for him. So he has to come back and be at least top 10. And it, like, taking the chance on a top, like Watson at 10, you know, you're far enough down that you can turn around and in a super flex, you can turn around and take one of these other guys that barely missed our, you know, our top 10. If you get number 10 and you get number 14, you know, you're good.
Yeah. How do you feel, Jason?
I, again, like Desean Watson from a fantasy performance perspective. Clearly, I have significant issues for his off-the-field misconducts if it turns out everything is as it appears. But from a value standpoint, I would much rather be taking him in the late 3rd or early 4th in a startup than having to pay up in the mid or early 2nd for a Trey Lance or Justin Fields. So it's more of kind of that balancing act that, in my mind, I'd rather just play that game and start off with maybe a young, maybe a Justin Jefferson, Javonte Williams start 1-2, and then have Desean Watson and maybe play it as a hair of a long game if you want to go productive struggle. But there's still the upside that Desean Watson ends up playing this season coming up, and now you're in a tremendous spot.
So, like Deshaun Watson basically did the same thing as Robert Kraft. He was just pushier about it. And nobody's on.
He did the same thing as Bill Cosby. If you're talking about numbers,
Oh, I didn't realize there were.
he's in the 30s in numbers.
Oh no. I mean, I'm sure Robert Kraft went to the massage shop, multiple times. But did Watson drug him like Cosby? I thought it was just he was trying to solicit things that he should not have been.
He's being accused of sexual assault. Robert Kraft, which we must admit, those charges were dismissed and found not to be accurate, was accused of illegal solicitation.
Okay,
So little bit different. Yeah. It's a little more on the Cosby train. What's going to be interesting is we should get a good idea. The judge just ruled that Deshaun Watson has to make himself available for deposition for 9 opposing counsel lawyers for 9 victims who allowed themselves to be deposed by his team. Now he has to be deposed by them. That's probably going to be the make or break that may push toward a settlement or something else. It's a tough situation. I will say the 2 places where I have Watson, I made sure I had options. So in one place, I was a Superflex defending champion, and I thought Watson's value is never going to be lower. I already have Allen, Herbert, Stafford, and Wilson. I threw away my first and got him. I didn't end up winning this year, but I'm fine rolling with those. In the other place, Watson was in Superflex, was my QB1, and I had Russell Wilson and Kirk Cousins, but I wasn't sure that was enough, and I used my first to get Aaron Rodgers. And again, I had been the runner-up. I didn't make it, probably for other reasons, because I have too many freaking Broncos on every team. But, I mean, I think those are the kind of, then if Watson comes back, you're in excellent shape. Maybe you can sell off an asset. But for me, it was – I need to protect myself in case he doesn't play, because it's also a player you're not setting free. You have to know you're burning in most leagues, you're just burning a bench spot because he was, since they did that healthy scratch thing, he was never IR eligible anywhere. So it's just, it's just a dead spot. But our last quarterback on the list is somebody that I actually used as my Watson hedge in a couple of those leagues, which is Russell Wilson of the Seahawks. Another guy, only Jason and I had him ranked. I was the highest. I had him 8th. Used to be incredibly reliable. Wasn't as good this last year, but the Seahawks in general weren't as good. Another guy who a lot of range of outcomes for teams he could be on. But I still like the talent. Jason, what do you like about Russell Wilson?
It seems like almost more of an aberration this past season, considering his history. And I understand the age. He's starting to get closer to those mid-30s years. John is heavily into the youth department at the quarterback position. I've given a bit more consideration over the past year or two on the shelf life of quarterback, and I'm a bit more comfortable now into the mid-30s with having a quarterback that, especially one with such a track record of consistent production, that I'm going to get a few still fairly prime years at worst, I believe, from a 34-year-old quarterback. Yeah, that's pretty much where I stand.
Is it mostly age for you again, John?
I mean, he burnt me this year. I traded for him with you, and he was not the QB1 that I needed him to be. But having said that, it's mostly age. Team's bad. He's in a bad situation. It depends on where he lands. And he's not a rushing quarterback anymore. He's never been a rushing quarterback, but he used to be able to scramble. With all the injuries he's taken to the bottom half of his body, he's having a hard time with that. And that kills a quarterback's total points. So unless a new offensive coordinator or something hops in at Seattle. I mean, he has weapons. He has Lockett. He has DK. Those guys aren't scrubs. And then there was another guy that really picked it up for him this season. I don't remember his name, though. Anyway, he's a Seahawk. I don't like the Seahawks. Same thing with Stafford. Wrong division for me to rank you. But yeah, he's older, a little broken down, and we don't know what's going to happen with him next year. So he's been trending down, and I don't like it.
Well, what is probably depressing for you is all 4 quarterbacks from the NFC West, all 4 projected current starters in the NFC West made this list. So
yeah,
tells you about the division. So I'm going to recap our top 10 real quick, and then we're going to go around one that you wish would have been on the list, and if you had to remove one, who would it be and why? So the top 10 that we have: number 1, Josh Allen; number 2, Patrick Mahomes; number 3, Justin Herbert; number 4, Joe Burrow; number 5, Kyler Murray; number 6, Lamar Jackson; 7, Dak Prescott; 8, Trey Lance; and a tie for 9, Matthew Stafford, Desean Watson, and Russell Wilson. So Jason, what's one quarterback that was on the cusp of making it? You are the only one of us that actually got all 10 of yours in.
Looks great to me.
It looks great to you. If you had to pull one and you had one that you wish was in, what would it be?
I think I'm fine with Lance and Superflex as a potential. But as a flyer, let's say it was 1 QB, I'd be down with taking a shot at Jalen Hurts there, just as an upside. If he doesn't pan out over one season, the cost isn't going to be prohibitive. So just play the upside at 1 QB. I'd consider Jalen Hurts feasible for this at the top 10.
All right, John, how about you?
Justin Fields. I don't like Ohio State, but I live in Columbus, Ohio. So I see these guys play, and he was good. He was really good. The only thing that I'm really concerned about with him is, it's similar with Joe Burrow. He's not as talented as Joe Burrow, I don't believe, but he plays for the Bears, and the Bears suck. The Bears have sucked. The Bears will suck. Justin and Andy turned Allen Robinson into an afterthought. Like, what did he get? 400 or 500 yards last season?
Like 436.
Yeah. So, if you can eliminate a guy that's, Pro Bowl, flirting with the Pro Bowl, down to that point, I think Fields is a highlights guy too. I like him, that spin move that he put on in the college game, then he did it again in the pros. I like watching the kid, so I hope he does well.
So I think for me, the one that I would have nowhere close to my top 10 that ends up in there is Lance. I'm not a believer. I wasn't a believer going into the draft. I actually have him currently as QB 18 for me, and that feels high, and I think it's only there because there is so much uncertainty with like a dozen teams in the NFL. At least Lance, we know where he's going to be for the next 3 years. So Ricky and I had the same second-year quarterback as our 10th pick, and that's Mack Jones. If we were talking about stability versus upside, he's definitely probably not on the upside scale. But stability, we thought that he might be the most stable, and I think we saw that he had by far the best year of any of the rookies out there starting. Seems to be in a great situation with Belichick. I know Josh McDaniels is gone, but I'm not a huge fan of McDaniels, and I think we've seen the Patriots have managed to be consistent no matter who their coordinators have been throughout the years with Bill there. I think they are a team that's actually poised to get a little bit better. It seems like they finally realized that wide receivers are an important function of both NFL football and fantasy football. So lot of talk that they're going to go get somebody. I think Mack Jones probably will never have the ceiling of the other 4 quarterbacks that were taken in the first round, but I have more faith in the longevity of his career and the stability of his performance. And for me, that matters a little bit when I'm looking at Dynasty. I don't like as much volatility because quarterbacks, you never know what you're going to get. Coming into this last year's draft was great. This year's draft is not shaping up too spectacular. So before we transition to movie corner, I'm going to spring this one on you guys, but I will go first so you have time to think. If you had to today pick which of the upcoming quarterbacks ends up being the highest drafted, which do you think it's going to be? And I've debated about this. I think it's going to end up being Malik Willis, even though I think he has possibly the biggest bust potential coming out of Liberty. He's a very raw prospect. He put up okay numbers against most of Liberty's opponents. When he played FBS opponents, he did not do as well, but I get why people want to reach for that. He has the potential dual threat, but I'll let John go first.
I have no idea who the top quarterbacks in the NFL draft are going to be. I watch college football for the numbers, next to the name. I am a ranking guy. So some of these smaller school guys, I have no idea. Mel Kiper is going to tell me all about them.
It's very telling. Kiper's mock that he put out only has 2 quarterbacks going in the first round and none higher than pick 20.
Yeah, I saw that. Just briefly going over it. But yeah, with quarterback especially, it's landing spot. It's system. You could be a top-end running back or a top-end wide receiver, and it doesn't really matter where you go. Look at Debo and Ayuk. It's something like that with everybody but quarterback. He's got to have the right landing spot for me to consider him.
And I mean, if it's consistent with what we saw from the Kiper mock that you mentioned, if all these quarterbacks are going into the later first rounds, they're probably going to end up in some pretty great landing spots because you're looking at teams that were playoff teams. If you want to count the Pittsburgh Steelers as a playoff team at the end of the day.
Technically, they made it.
And they had a lead against the Chiefs for a moment, so they appeared. For me, I'm going to side with Malik Willis because I just think you're getting that dynamic athleticism, and for the most part, you're getting 3 or 4 other quarterbacks that aren't really any different from each other in the rest of the crew. Matt Corral, Kenny Pickett, Sam Howell, Carson Strong, if you want to go there. But Malik Willis offers you that upside that Matt alluded to. And if I'm taking a shot, I'm taking a shot on him.
Yeah.
Otherwise, someone falls into the second round of the NFL draft. I'll just, take whoever is left really there.
That's it. Some of these rookie drafts, particularly Superflex rookie drafts, are going to be fascinating because no one's in love with any of the quarterback or running back prospects, which, those are probably the 2 most fungible and important things, especially for teams that are usually picking at the top of a fantasy rookie draft. Those are probably the positions you don't have. It's not an optimal year. Before we get out, yep.
I got a quick one. Where do you rank Mack Jones if they sign Amari to a 4-year deal? Does he go up?
I'd probably still have him at 10 because I don't think he has the ceiling of some of those other guys. But again, I like the stability. They're going to get somebody, whether it's Amari Cooper or Jarvis Landry or, they've been linked to taking Jameson Williams in the first round of the draft. They're going to get a receiver. We've seen I still somehow think they did not spend that much money on Jonnu Smith to have him not have any role. I think they've got to figure out how to use both their tight ends. And they have some complementary. Kendrick Bourne if he was like your third receiver, slot receiver, isn't a terrible option. Jacoby Meyer has his moments. They just need that probably number one target. And I almost think an Amari Cooper, a Jarvis Landry, some kind of a possession receiver probably makes more sense than them trying to go get a banger, because I don't see them as we're just going to take 7 steps and vault it down the field kind of offense.
Yeah, I see Jacoby as being an excellent wide receiver too. He is not the guy though.
Yeah.
Would you like Juju joining the Patriots?
Yeah,
I would love it because I don't like the Patriots anymore.
I mean, that would be another Juju, Jarvis Landry, Amari Cooper. I think they can do some similar things as a possession kind of a receiver. They maybe aren't the field stretcher, and then they go get some kind of rocket if they want to pull the top off the defense. They need something because it wasn't working. Nelson Aguilar ain't it.
No.
N'Keal Harry ain't it.
Maybe they go out and get Tyrell Williams. Hope he doesn't get another concussion. That burned the draft pick this season.
Oh, boy. All right. Well, before we get out of here, we're going to wrap up with Movie Corner as we do each and every week. I will be going over some of the new films, which both Ricky and I have reviews out on and are going to be part of the Banana Meter. But the biggest release of the week is, believe it or not, guys, they're making a movie about Batman. I don't think it's ever happened. No, I'm just kidding. Every few years, we get a remake of Batman. This time, it's Robert Pattinson, taking over the Batman role. Twihards are running out to watch a comic book movie for the first time in the history of their lives. It is 3 hours. It was a 4-hour theater commitment that I made yesterday to get all the way through it. But before I touch on that, I'm guessing neither of you have yet seen the Batman.
No. It's not out on like HBO Max or anything yet, is it?
No.
Because I am not going to pay a dime to go see a DC movie.
Yeah,
it's not going to happen.
But do you guys have a favorite previous Batman movie? Who wants to go first?
Oh, I'll jump in there. Well, it's kind of a toss-up. Like Michael Keaton Batman, love it. The original
Michael
Batman
Keaton is still the best Batman.
Yeah. So, the original, not the original, but the original Batman, that is my favorite by far. And then you get into Returns. Forever was the one with Carrie and Tommy Lee. I really like that one. I know it's a terrible movie, but I really liked it. It was campy, but Batman Returns, Batman Forever, and then the original one with Adam West. It's hilarious, especially now.
It's a whole different idea of Batman.
Yeah,
definitely swung the pendulum.
Yeah, and it's an amazing cast. Eartha Kitt, other people that I can't remember their names, but Ernest Borgnine, I believe, was the Penguin. Maybe.
No, I think it's Burgess Meredith.
Burgess Meredith was the Penguin. Yeah, those are similar names. But yeah, love the old ones. But Batman with Jack Nicholson and Michael Keaton was it.
That was literally the first superhero movie I ever saw. I was born in 81. That movie came out in Batman 89. The first Batman's always been my favorite superhero. It's probably because I watched the animated series and then started watching those movies.
I was born in 81, so Batman was one of the very first superhero movies that I saw. So that might, there's good memories attached to it. That might be it.
Yeah. It was fun, me trying to describe to Ricky the child nostalgia that keeps that up high for me.
Yeah.
How about you, Jason? Any Batman movie you're a fan of?
I enjoy the Batman series. I was a Spider-Man, fan growing up. But, I think the Batman franchise for me, the pinnacle for obvious reasons is The Dark Knight Rises. Because where else do you get a destroyed Heinz Field, with Hines Ward in the end zone by himself with the football at the end. So pretty exciting.
That actually is Ricky's favorite. I don't know if the one that we just had displaced that, but that is Ricky loves that movie as well. I also love that one. My favorite Batman movie, and remains my favorite Batman movie, is The Dark Knight. That's one of my favorite movies of all time. There is a struggle between good and evil and worldview that really speaks to me in what Christopher Nolan did there. This new one is very different. It's not like any kind of thing you've ever seen. Ricky described it as mostly a hard-boiled detective film, and that's fairly accurate. I got strong vibes at points of Watchmen.
Nice.
They almost lean into, Rorschach was patterned off of Batman because Alan Moore was a DC Comics writer, and you have a very strong, influence there. But I would also say one of the big films that I constantly thought about during that 3 hours is Seven. It's very, so, that gives you probably an idea. That is not two things you think of in the traditional comic book sense. I was very, very skeptical of Robert Pattinson playing this role, but I thought he did a decent job. There are some beautiful shots, a haunting score. It's maybe a little too long, and it's definitely dark, both in plot and also, can DC not afford cinematic lights? I've a lot of people have asked this question, but there are some times where it's just like, okay, what are you doing? But I thought it was a very interesting take. I'll be curious to see. A lot of critics have so far loved it a lot. I gave it 4 stars out of 5. I have it sitting as number 1 for my top 10 of the year so far. I thought it was really good. It is a huge weekend for movies being released. There is 3 different films that were part of the Sundance Film Festival that are also coming out this week. The Banana Meter, for those of you that are following that Ricky started, the Batman will be one of our Banana Meter films. The early Banana Meter reviews were 89%, which would put it by far the highest. I think it's going to end up going a little bit higher based on scoring I've seen. The other Banana Meter movie is a movie called Fresh that came out at the Sundance Film Festival. Between the Batman and Fresh, this is probably the most unsettling week of films that we've had new releases so far. I watched it this morning after I ate breakfast. I regret that I ate before I watched it. That's all I'll say about that. I thought it was very compelling, but it is deeply unsettling. Ricky naturally loved it. He gave it 4.5 stars. I would not be surprised if it hits over 80% on the Banana Meter as well. Another Sundance movie that I really like that premieres on Showtime is called After Yang. It's got Colin Farrell, who is actually in the Batman. He plays Penguin in the Batman. You may not recognize him because of the face makeup they put on him in the Batman. You will definitely recognize him in After Yang. It is a very different, pensive, slow-moving, thoughtful movie. Ricky gave it B-. His review dropped this morning. I gave it 4 stars. I liked it more than he did. These things happen. And then the last of the new releases from Sundance this week is a documentary, Lucy and Desi, about Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz on Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime released Being the Ricardos, which was the fictionalized version from Aaron Sorkin that's kind of competing for some Academy Awards. But now you can see the documentary done by Amy Poehler. So an interesting and diverse weekend of films, the first 2 of which are dark AF. So enjoy. But before we get out of here, why don't you tell people where they can find you? Where can they find you, John?
I am at iHeart Caravans on Twitter, Instagram, pretty much anywhere you look, you'll find me at iHeart Caravans. So tweet me if you need me. I'll be there.
Jason?
I'm at Astorita Jason on Twitter. That's pretty much the only place you're going to find me if you're not perusing for some old Dynasty content or Flyers content on the Music City Drive-In. Look forward to doing some more of these panels as we discuss our Dynasty rankings for the remainder of March.
Yeah, and we will be back next Friday looking at running backs. You can find me at Nighthawk7734. As I said, the post version of today's ranking with our scoring will drop later this afternoon. It'll be the same throughout the month. Ricky may be back with us next week. He will certainly be back the week following when free agency opens. We'll be doing the wide receiver panel and probably talking about the NFL's version of March Madness, which is doling out billions of dollars to crush the hopes and dreams of fan bases or to provide false hope to fan bases. Tis coming. But for now, we will sign off. Have a great weekend and enjoy the NFL Combine.